Representative Hill relative to abortion.
Representative Hill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 3808 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Hill moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call for First Amendment.
House Health and Human Resources Committee Amendment Number 1 is spread on the members' desks.
Chairman Cassada.
Madam Speaker, Amendment 1 rewrites the bill. It prohibits a physician from performing an abortion unless the physician has admitting privileges at a hospital in the county in which the abortion is performed or in a county adjacent to the county in which the abortion was performed. Move adoption.
Chairman Cassada moves adoption. Amendment Number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of Amendment Number 1 say aye. Those opposed say no. You adopt. Next amendment.
House Amendment Number 2 is spread on the members' desk in Amendment Pack Number 7. Madam Speaker, it was not timely filed.
Representative Shipley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Sponsor,
Yes, sir.
as we have discussed here on the floor this morning, when we talk about the issue of an abortion being performed in a doctor's office, we all know it's a surgical procedure that has sometimes very grave consequences to the patient. And we've talked about that for a number of years. I've always supported the idea that where such a procedure is being performed, there should be proper equipment, personnel, and procedures in place to provide care for the woman. It's my understanding in most of these facilities that there is no such care. Well, this amendment speaks to that, but after some consultation with you today and leaders on the floor, I recognize that we'd have to send this worthy amendment all the way back to the Health Care Committee. And with that, Madam Speaker, I move to withdraw.
That objection withdrawn. Next amendment.
No further amendments, Madam Speaker.
Chairman Hill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, women who undergo a surgical procedure have access to post-operative care when they have unexpected complications. The reason that they have access to this post-operative care is because their physicians feel an ethical and moral duty to be available to care for their patients. What this legislation will do, as amended, will seek to ensure that women who undergo abortion have access to their physicians and that those physicians are equipped to handle any situation that may arise. With that explanation and pending some vigorous discussion, I renew my motion.
Chairman Hill renews his motion. Discussion on the bill. Representative Odom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members of the House. Let me say we have had some vigorous discussions on that. I have the utmost respect for the sponsor. He stated in committee that this legislation was brought to him, I believe, by Tennessee Right to Life. We had a great deal of discussion about this legislation, which was titled Life Defense Act of 2012. The sponsor offered an amendment to remove some very onerous posting information about the names of physicians who perform surgical abortions and demographic data about women who've had abortions on a county-by-county basis, which was very troubling because I thought it could expose those women to being identified simply through the demographic information. Now, I need to ask you a question, Representative Hill, if you will yield.
Absolutely.
But there was confusion in the committee, and I think there's confusion on the floor about how and where surgical abortions are performed. Under Tennessee law, surgical abortions must be performed in an ambulatory surgery and treatment center. We have many of those ambulatory surgical centers throughout the state of Tennessee. They're in large cities and they're in small cities. There's only a few of those ambulatory surgical centers that perform surgical abortions, and they are a few that are located in Nashville and there are a few that are located in Memphis. Ambulatory surgical centers are licensed by the state of Tennessee, and they're inspected. They have to meet some fairly rigorous facility requirements in a similar way to hospitals. Nowhere, and let me say first, there are a variety of surgeries that are performed in ambulatory surgical centers. And some in this chamber may have had procedures performed there. There are dental surgery procedures. There are eye surgery procedures. There are foot, knee, a variety of different kinds. And all of these ambulatory surgical centers are licensed and regulated by the state of Tennessee. This legislation, even though it's been amended, and with all due respect, Representative Hill, it requires hospital privileges to only be held by those physicians who do the abortion surgical procedures. Not any of the other surgery procedures, but only the abortion surgery procedures. In May of 2005, and this is to the question that I want to get on the record, Representative Hill, our Attorney General issued an opinion and found that a proposed restriction or law related to abortion must satisfy the strict scrutiny standard imposed by the Tennessee Supreme Court. Under this standard, a restriction upon a woman's right to obtain an abortion will be struck down unless the state meets its burden of showing that the regulation is justified by compelling state interest and narrowly tailored to achieve that interest. Now, my question to you is, how in the world can this legislation, even after the amendments, how can it meet that standard when you're clearly discriminating against surgical abortion procedures and all of these other procedures? How would you respond to that, Chairman Hill, if you would yield?
Well, Representative Odom, first of all, I can assure you that a litany of attorneys and lawyers and legal counsel have looked over this legislation numerous times, and they feel very confident that it does meet the strict scrutiny standards. You mentioned that in the Attorney General's opinion it says that the state has to prove a compelling state interest. I can think of nothing more compelling than the safety and welfare of the woman. That's number one. Number two, you brought up the question about, well, why are we wanting, or why do I want with this legislation, to have admitting privileges for physicians who perform abortions when everyone else that does different procedures and surgical procedures at ambulatory surgery centers are not included in this legislation. And the reason is, after doing quite a bit of research and checking with some various physicians, many physicians already have admitting privileges in hospitals when they are already at the surgery centers performing the other procedures. So to answer your question simply, why are abortion doctors included in this legislation? Because they don't currently have to have admitting privileges in a hospital. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, the compelling state interest is the woman's safety, the woman's health. I would envision that it would be very difficult for someone to vote against this legislation because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that women who undergo an abortion have continuous access to a physician who has experience in dealing with the complications of abortion. To be able to get admitting privileges to a hospital, you don't just fill out a piece of paper and turn it in. You have to be able to demonstrate competency and, in some cases, excellence in the field that you practice, in this case, abortions. Right now, you have women who have complications, go to the emergency room, they present, and the doctors have to start from scratch there. The doctor that performed the abortion is not held responsible. In some cases, the doctor is not even in this state anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, this legislation is about the health and the safety of the woman. And it does comply with the compelling state interest, and that is the safety of the woman. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Odom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate your response, Chairman Hill, but there's one problem with it. And the problem is, why are we selecting, again, only abortion surgical procedures when we have this vast multitude of surgical procedures, including things like tonsillectomies on children? You got knee, foot, eye surgery, all of which can have complication. But this bill doesn't say the physician who performs any surgical procedure in one of these facilities must have hospital privileges. It only says that physicians who do abortion surgical procedures are the ones that are now required. I think that's a major problem. I will also add, under the licensing of ambulatory surgical treatment centers, there's a requirement that if there is a surgery in process and a complication occurs, the ASTC must have a contract with a local hospital for the transportation of the patient. And I think most of us who've undergone surgical procedures realize that once we travel back, which may be to our home, may be 100 miles from where the surgery took place, we are instructed by our surgeon, in the event there's a complication that occurs when you get home, you go to the closest emergency room or you call 911. That's generally what's the directions to patients is given by surgeons, by all physicians, if you call them after hours. I really don't think that this legislation has anything to do with the safety of the woman. I think, as it was titled, this is the Life Defense Act of 2012. I think it's intended to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to place another requirement on a physician that makes it more difficult for a woman to seek out the services they want that are legal under the state of Tennessee and legal in this country. And I would hope you would oppose this legislation.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I find it interesting. First of all, I appreciate the representative from Davidson County quoting the title of the legislation correctly. It is called the Life Defense Act of 2012. However, I believe the representative is mistaken. The life I'm talking about is of the woman. So let's make that perfectly clear. That's number one. Number two, to continue to make the false assertion that abortions only take place in surgery centers is ludicrous. We all know where the abortions take place in our communities. We all know where they take place in our districts. And they take place in many, many different locations other than just ambulatory surgery centers. I think that it is a false assertion to think that Planned Parenthood has surgery centers all over the state of Tennessee. So I thank the representative for acknowledging the name of the legislation, but I would like to remind the body that the Life Defense Act of 2012 does have to do with the life of the woman. Thank you.
Leader Turner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. All right, take a deep breath. You got a little edge to your voice right now. I don't want you to get all, it's going to be civil. The original bill, though, did deal more with abortion than what this does. This bill's been changed somewhat from what the original bill was.
We have amended the legislation, yes, sir.
Okay, so so the title is the same title in the other bill also, right?
Yes.
So we've changed it a little bit. We've taken a lot out of this bill, and I've got a question here. I've just noticed this while I sit here reading, and then I've got another example I might want to use here in a second. But in the original bill, I think it actually talked about surgical abortions. This bill only mentions abortion. Now, I think we may have, and some people consider contraception an abortion. So are we going to limit doctors' right to prescribe contraceptive medicine or what?
Under Title 39-15-202, when little h number 1 in the amendment, it says a physician may not perform an abortion. An abortion titled under that section would be a procedure, not a...
So Section 39-15-202.
I believe so, yes,
Okay.
sir.
Well, I didn't have the code here, and I was just reading that and looking at it. So if that's correct, then I thank you for that explanation. You were saying that you're concerned about the life of the mother and the welfare of the woman, and I appreciate that. I think most people would. But yet we're limited in that the right for that woman to get care under this act. If you had a woman who came to Nashville in one of the hospitals here with a very difficult pregnancy, and she had to have the baby aborted due to the life of the mother, or for whatever reason they came up with to have to perform this procedure. And let's say she lived in Maury County. She goes back to Maury County that day, complication arises, she goes to the emergency room. That physician in Nashville can't go down and treat her now.
No, but all the physicians at the Maury County Hospital can.
But may not be the same thing. But you're limited in that right of the physician who has firsthand knowledge of this.
No, I'm doing the exact opposite.
No, you're not. You're prohibited the physician in Nashville from going to Maury County and taking care of it. Well, let me ask you this: if you're that concerned, why is a contiguous county in here? Then you say you're for the life of the mother, protection of the mother. That's fine. I agree with that. Everybody's for making sure we have good women's health here. I think everybody should do that. So, but why limit the contiguous county? I don't see. If you're really concerned about that, why are you trying to put that barrier up? That's the only thing. Answer that for me.
The reason it has contiguous counties is because we don't have hospitals in every single county of the state.
But okay, I understand that. But why limit somebody who needed a certain health procedure done from having to go from one county to the other?
Once again, I don't agree with the assertion that we're limiting access to care. If anything, for the first time, we're going to expand access to life-saving care, and let me explain why. Currently, we have abortion doctors that are traveling across the state of Tennessee to go to places where other doctors won't perform abortions. They perform the abortion, and then they go back home across the state without any repercussions on them, their medical license, or anything if there's complications to the woman. That's number one. Number two, we have abortion physicians that are flying into this state and that they are performing abortions, and I think when you look at TCA, they're doing it illegally, but that's for another discussion because they don't have a license in this state, but that's another topic for another time. They're flying into this state, performing abortions, and flying out. And what happens when a woman has a complication, the doctor who performed that abortion is long gone. So if anything, and I know it's to be true, this legislation will expand critical, possibly life-saving access to care to the woman who has complications from the abortion. That's why I'm bringing the legislation, and that is, in all practicality, what it will do.
How many doctors are doing that, flying in to do this? How many doctors are flying in to perform these procedures?
I don't have the exact number.
Well,
You could probably call Planned Parenthood if you'd like.
They're not bringing this bill. You are. You're making assertions that people are doing this, and do you know of any particular places happening that?
I do know of one physician that is driving from Northeast Tennessee across the state of Tennessee to do this.
Okay. But you said out of state flying in, but you don't know of any instance anybody. You said there's somebody flying in from out of state doing this too, but you don't know that for sure.
I do not have direct knowledge of that, no, sir.
Okay. Well, see, that's kind of like the. Well, let me say. I'm going to finish up here, Representative Hill. Just let me say this. So, I don't understand if you're truly, and I think you're an honorable person. You and I get along on a lot of things, and I think you're an honorable person here. But I do not understand why we're putting the barrier up, because there's going to be some women in this state that cannot have these. Whether the procedure is right or wrong or not, it's a legal procedure, all right. But we're going to limit some women in the state. We're putting up barriers to them being able to see this particular form of care or procedure, whatever you want to go there.
How?
Well, you're putting these contiguous. You're limited where a physician can go to perform these procedures.
No, I'm making sure that they have admitting privileges and that they are actually competent in case there are complications.
Well, let me ask you this. Okay, one more, and I'll hush after my last question here. Are there any other procedure that we do this with? I mean, do we do this with brain surgery or heart surgery, or do we say you have to be in contiguous
If you're
counties?
going to do brain surgery, you better have admitting privileges to a hospital.
But
Yes, sir.
do we have that barrier about contiguous county? There's any other medical procedure that's on the books today that we perform that we put a barrier up that says contiguous counties?
I don't know of any.
I think the answer is no. So that's the concern I have, that we are trying to do more than what you're stating here. And you may think that's what you're doing, but I think there's a lot more to it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I call previous question.
Previous question. Is there objection? I see objection. All those in favor of previous question, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 65, noes 30.
Previous question prevails. Representative Hill, did you seek recognition?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I appreciate the ability to make a closing comment because I don't want there to be any distraction or any misunderstanding about what this legislation does. This is landmark, groundbreaking legislation. We have seen it pass in several other states with the same purpose behind it, which is the safety of the woman. The vast majority of physicians who have privileges to perform surgical procedures in outpatient surgery centers already have admitting privileges at one or more hospitals as well. In fact, there are freestanding outpatient surgery centers in the state of Tennessee who will not give operating privileges to physicians who do not already have admitting privileges at a hospital. This bill will ensure that a woman who undergoes an abortion have continuous access to a physician who has experience in dealing with the complications of abortion, and that those physicians have access to a facility that is equipped to provide the resources that might be necessary on a 24/7 basis. And as one of the speakers pointed out, this is about the life of the woman. This is about the safety of the woman, and I would appreciate your support on this important piece of legislation.
We are voting on House Bill 3808. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 72, noes 24.
House Bill 3808, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, motion to reconsider is tabled. Next bill.
House Bill 3636 by Parkinson, relative to K-12 education. Madam Speaker, members, the Senate bill is on the desk.